Welcome. Today, we're actually starting the real work. Yesterday, we had a beautiful experience. Those of you who were here could feel the positive energy that was here with us yesterday. So it was tiring, but I was happy to be part of all this. Today we will be starting a day full of activities and work, but before we start, I would like to remind everyone that at some point go to reception again here, the reservation table, so that they give you also your participation certificate. Some of you would want it. So they are all prepared. When you want, you can go for it and pick it up. I would also like to remind you that if you haven't yet registered for the breakouts, you do so immediately, especially for the second round. For the first round, just if you haven't registered, pick one and go to it. As you know, we have 3 breakouts and another 3 breakouts after each keynote. I now invite Joel Johnston to introduce the keynote.
Good morning. I'd like to introduce Dr. Crystal Edwards. She is the superintendent of Lawrence Township Public Schools in New Jersey, and she first became involved with Let Me Learn in 2006 when she was hired as the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction in Lawrence. Having 7- and 8-year-olds share and explain their patterns and show how they used this knowledge about themselves was enough to completely hook her. Dr. Edwards was such a believer of Let Me Learn that she has made it a part of the district strategic plan. And she also welcomes other teachers from different states, Spain and Malta, to visit with her teachers and students to learn more about Let Me Learn. As a former biology and chemistry teacher, Dr. Edwards is most impressed with how Let Me Learn establishes a platform for inquiry-based learning. Please join me now in welcoming Dr. Crystal Edwards.
Well, good morning, everyone. First, let me say thank you to Joel and Colin and Christine for this opportunity to celebrate with you all this 20th anniversary of Let Me Learn. This is a wonderful, wonderful event, and I am just so pleased to be a part of it. Having said that, Let Me Learn is about children, and I am certainly about children, and that's why we're all here today. So what I would like to do this morning is hopefully re-energize, inspire, and motivate you for some of the wonderful things we can do in the future to really help our children be successful. Because if we stay focused on them and really stay focused on them, we're going to have a better world going forward. And Let Me Learn is just a start of where we need to be to stay focused on our kids. So I'm going to take you through a journey that's going to go back in the past, bring us to our present, and then take us to the future. So are we up for a journey? Okay, all right. Okay. So I'd like to start with a do now, a little warm-up. Take a look at this child. I know you're thinking she's so cute, but take a look at this child and think about that question. Really think about that question. What are the chances that this child will successfully graduate from a U.S. high school? And get a number in your head, a percentage that you think, and just hold it there. Now let me tell you a little bit more about this child. This child is medically fragile. This child was born legally blind in the right eye, but that wasn't diagnosed until age 7, having been in school. This child also suffered from asthma and was hospitalized quite often before the age of 5. This child lived just above the poverty line in a home that was small, 3 bedrooms, 7 adults, 5 children. This child spent the first 7 years of life sharing a bed with her grandmother. That was her bedroom. This child was also in an unstable home. There was some domestic violence amongst the adults. There was chronic smoking, which I assume played into the asthma. And there was also divorce. So as you think about that number that you had in your head about the success for this child, and you consider this information, you probably note that that number decreases. And in fact, research suggests that these conditions negatively impact student achievement. But there's a story behind that. This child had some amazing teachers. This child had teachers who inspired her to love science, literacy, and math. This child had some awesome teachers, like the ones I see in this room, who helped her gain an appreciation for the arts and music. And due to the work of these outstanding, wonderful teachers, this child experienced success and actually did graduate from high school. And in fact, those teachers were so talented that this child is standing in front of you today. So I know sometimes teaching is very hard, but I am a success story for a group of teachers, and you are a success story for a group of students, so don't ever forget that. Okay, so in 1983, when I graduated from high school, not only did I graduated at the top of my class with honors. So there I am, on my way to Penn State University. I am the first person in my family to actually go to college. So my family is proud, I am proud. It's 1983, I'm excited, and then this happens. President Reagan's National Commission on Excellence in Education publishes A Nation at Risk. At the time that I was graduating, a nation at risk. Well, that doesn't sound very pleasant for someone who just graduated high school. So let's talk a little bit more about what did this mean for me. In 1983, when I received my high school diploma, A Nation at Risk said American schools were failing. The schools that I just went to, they were failing. Not only were they failing, A Nation at Risk said that most 17-year-olds, and I was 17, didn't possess higher intellectual skills. Most 17-year-olds. Most 17-year-olds like myself also could not draw inferences from written material. Most 17-year-olds like me could not write a persuasive essay. I'd written tons of essays. Most 17-year-olds, now you saw I was interested in math, cannot solve mathematical problems involving multiple steps. This document was sent to everyone. It was the first time in history that they said that my generation will not surpass, will not equal, won't even come close to the educational skills of my parents. And I just said I was the first person in my family to go to college. I was so excited, and this came out. And we were so deflated. Because not only did this come out, not only was it written as a letter to American people, everyone believed it. So they looked at us as if we, as a generation, had nothing to offer society. We were society's failures, and everyone knew it. Well, not everyone. Some people still believed. That's my mom. She never doubted me. She was my first teacher. She believed in me. And there were other teachers that believed in me. And that's going to be so critical as we go forward, that we are not defined by the publications such as A Nation at Risk, but we define ourselves. So as we move forward, one of the things I did when I went to Penn State as a chemical engineering major, I changed my major to become a teacher because I wanted to have the impact on children that someone had on me. I wanted to be the person who would open doors for children the way someone opened doors for me. And I became a teacher and an administrator and now a superintendent. And this is me at my last graduation, sending off graduates who are not a nation at risk, but a bunch of graduates that I am very, very proud of. So, our journey today is not to be a nation at risk, but I'm going to suggest that we write our own book, that we change the story, that we now become a nation embracing risk. And you may sit there and say, education and risk, they don't go together. Look at the definition of risk, to take a chance or a chance taken. And even if we use some synonyms for risk, danger in education, liability, exposure. But if we really think about that, where would we be if the Wright brothers had not embraced the dangers of flight? That had to be scary. The dangers of flight. Yet here I stand today, having flown across the country in front of you because someone embraced the risk. Where would we be if Jenner had not exposed us to cowpox material in order to protect us from smallpox? Again, someone taking a risk, which we benefited from. And talk about liability. Today, we put our credit card into our computers for almost everything to purchase goods and services. And what's more liable than that? Yet it's something that we can't live without. These people embraced risk. That's what we should do as educators. We need to embrace risk. And we've already started, because the fact that we want to unlock potential means we're willing to do what it takes to embrace risk. And Let Me Learn, where we focus on the learner, is embracing that risk. So let's talk about our book. There are several things we need to do as educators. One, we need to identify our challenges. What faces us today? Second, we need to accept the responsibility that we can do this, that it is our job to work with these young people to make this better. This is my favorite one. We absolutely have to believe. You have to believe in children. You have to believe that all children can learn. But you also have to believe in yourself, that you have the power, the capacity to do it. Third, or fourth, we have to focus on learning. There's a difference between teaching and learning, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we have to act with purpose. So when you plan your lessons and when you implement them, they have to have purpose behind them. And then finally, we have to put it all together. So we're going to take a journey through this book and see what that looks like. And at the end, we'll look at 4 examples of what it looks like in practice. So identifying the challenges. And there are over 400 staff members in my school. Most of them are teachers, and they tell me every day the biggest challenge that teachers face. So here's a typical classroom, probably not much different here in Malta. Here are the students that are sitting in front of you. There's a lot of diversity in the classroom. There is a lot of diversity in the classroom. There's generally only one teacher who's sitting there wondering, how do I teach all of these students with the different backgrounds, different cultures. How do I do that with all of these students? That is the challenge that we face. That is the biggest challenge that we face in the classroom. The second thing is we have to truly embrace our responsibility to educate young people. And the word educate young people, the word educate, changes year after year after year, because as teachers, we're required to do more and more and more. But that's our responsibility. So when we look at it, it looks like this now. Teachers are responsible for the content knowledge. Everybody knows that. We teach them math. We teach them science. We teach them civics. We teach music and art. But we also have to teach kids personal skills, because without these personal skills, the art, the science, the math is useless for them. They have to actually be able to apply this knowledge outside the classroom to be successful. So we have to teach them how to endure, how to persevere, how to struggle a little bit, but not get defeated, how to regroup, how to reflect. These are all things that are part of our curriculum as well, that as educators, we accept the responsibility that we have to teach children this. And when you look at Let Me Learn, you'll see all of this embedded in Let Me Learn. Because once children understand this about themselves and how they think and how they process and interact and react with material, they will be able to persevere. They will be able to endure. They can stop, reflect, adjust. They can do these very things. So it is absolutely essential that we know that about children, but we teach children to know that about themselves. That's part of our responsibility. Believe, 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 believe. This quote to me is so powerful, because children know when they think you think they can't do something. They know when you don't believe in them. They know when you have low expectations for them. And they will rise to what you believe. So if you believe they can succeed, they will. But you also have to believe that you can do it. I have some teachers who are very frustrated with this work because it is so draining. It is so tired. It is so much. But never, never doubt that you can't do it. You have to believe in your ability to really move a child along a continuum and help him be successful. Before they even get to us at age 5 or 4 or 3, before they even have formal schooling, kids know they know how to read and write. We just have to create experiences where we develop it further. They know it. They already believe that they're talented before they even get to our schools. Before they come to us, children love science and math. They love it. They use their scientific reasoning and their mathematical ability to navigate everything. If you've ever had a toddler, you know they're pretty crafty at getting into things that you're like, how did you get into that? That's their natural ability for science and math. Before they even come to our schools, they have this. They are so creative. They really are. And they're not afraid to be creative before they come to us. They already have these skills. And this is my favorite as a science teacher. And I know Sue's out here and she has a whole bunch of inquiry materials, and Eileen's going to do a wonderful workshop on inquiry. But we don't really need to teach students how to inquire. They already know. They already know. We need to create experiences where, again, they can build on that. That's our job, to make sure that we don't get in their way. They're ready. These children at age 0 almost, 1 month, 2 years old, 3 years old, before they step into our schools, all children are already pre-programmed for learning. They're ready. They're ready before we get them. However, we can do some things in our curriculum, such as the one-size-fits-all, such as not paying attention to the individual learners, and just delivering what we think is best without connecting it to the children. When we do that, we start to see some of this in the classroom. And those children who were very engaged stop being engaged. And after a while, this is what we have sitting in front of us. So if we're not careful, if we don't embrace every strategy that we know works, like Let Me Learn, we go from children who were programmed for learning to actually being the ones who deprogram children for learning, particularly if they experience this year after year after year. This is what a high school classroom could look like with children who haven't had the opportunity to learn the way that is best for them. And we certainly don't want that. Our next thing is to focus on learning. Many of the educational evaluation systems, I evaluate principals and teachers, many of them focus on the teaching. You could spend a whole day just looking at the teachers, but you have to turn around and look at the students. You have to focus on, are they learning? Are they getting it? Are they absorbing that knowledge and using that knowledge? If you don't focus on learning, teaching is just talking if kids aren't learning. So again, this is my little schematic that I use for my teachers. And I'll say, of course it made sense when it came out of your mouth, because everything we deliver makes sense. But then that information has to go through a child's brain and be processed. So what they actually hear or interact with or engage depends on a lot of factors. And once it goes through that, you can see there are filters. And again, here is where Let Me Learn is spot on about children's filters. So they have to interact and process information before they can even do anything with it. And some students are stopped right at the beginning. So if we take time to understand a child's filter, we will be better educators. And that's part of that responsibility that it takes to really, really help children learn. And this is just another schematic about how children interact with the experiences we set up for them. It's not just academic. They almost always have an emotional reaction to what we're doing. And I taught math. I cannot tell you how many times in high school I had students, particularly girls, who will throw their hands up on day one and say, I'm not good at math. And their parents would say, oh, I'm not good at math either. Well, that's not acceptable, because if I permit that language, then I promote that language. So no, I have to do something about I'm not good at math. That's a feeling they have. That's a feeling. That's an emotion that I have to attack. And kids are very emotional. So we do have to look at the total child when we're doing our lessons. So this is the difference between teaching and learning. This top quadrant is what we're doing as teachers. So we combine our content, our pedagogy, our personal skills and development, our presentation, and our engagement. That's all us. And we put it out there. But kids have to absorb it. They have a filter. And in this particular case, Let Me Learn, if you look at their patterns will give you information about how they're receiving that wonderful stuff you just put out there is being received differently by each different child. But you need to know that. And then if you really want to get the accurate student response, you have to adjust and help children adjust so that they receive the information in a way that is productive for them. So we have to help them with this. Okay, our fifth point. Now that we know all of this, and this is where sometimes as educators, we fall down because there is so much research on education that is not being used in the classroom. So we have to act and act with purpose and recognize that our main product that we interact with, children, they actually change over time. So I've been in education. This is my 29th year. The children that I taught 29 years ago are very different than the children that are sitting in front of me today. So I can't do the same things over and over and over again. I have to act with purpose. Go back to that responsibility. I am responsible for changing my practice to get that result from children. That is that successful result. It is not good enough to say, I've been teaching this the same way for years and it's worked. It may have worked with that group of children, but perhaps it doesn't work anymore. But because I'm an educator and I keep students first, I am open to changing my practices to make sure. So what does it look like when we act with purpose? So this is something I call my 3P focus, where we dissect children. There are 3 types of children. If you have children yourself, think about this or think about the kids in your classroom. First, we have kids that all we have to do is point them in the right direction. They just need us to tell them, this is where you're going, this is where you're moving to, this is where you need to be. Just a little point, and they're off and running. And then we have their cousins, the ones that we need to pull in the right direction. These are children who may not even want to sit in our classroom, or who have given up, or who don't believe in themselves. And we are pulling them along. We are trying our best. And perhaps some of our pulling is really, we're pulling the child and the child's family because there's no support at home. So that's a tough pull, but we continue to pull. And then we have children that we have to give a gentle push to. And what determines whether or not we point, push, or pull? These 2 things. So when we look at the content knowledge and we look at the personal skills, we can see where children will fall into one of these quadrants, where they're either needing us to point for them, or to pull, or to push, depending upon their level in these areas. Now, I've been talking about children, but most of my work is with principals or heads of school, with the adults. And I will say children are a lot easier than the adults sometimes. So I have adults that I have to point. I have adults that I have to pull, and I have adults that I also have to push. So this works for teachers as well, because what we see with teachers, some of them know their content very well. And in elementary school, some of them know their content very well, but there are other areas that maybe they weren't fully trained on. Science tends to be one for an elementary school teacher that, well, I had maybe 1 or 2 science courses in college. I don't feel that prepared to teach science. Pedagogy and methods. We have teachers who went, at least in the United States, through the traditional program of teaching, and then we have people who were in business who've now turned into teaching who may not have strong pedagogy. And then, of course, presentation. And presentation is important for engaging students. So we have teachers who stand in front of kids and lecture, and then teachers who really engage children in the learning. And if you're using Let Me Learn, engagement isn't a problem, because Let Me Learn starts with engaging the learner in his or her own learning. So you would have that. And I also have teachers who have high personal skills, and I have teachers who don't have effective personal skills. So we're working on this in multitudes of levels in our buildings with our students, our teachers, our administrators, and our central staff. All right, so let's take a look at what can we do when we have children or adults who we need to push. So these are our high content areas. They know the material. They have high personal skills. They're motivated. They'll try. They take time to reflect. You really don't have to worry about them. But can I tell you that this group, this is the most at-risk group of students I have in my school. Do you know why? They get the least amount of teacher time. This is the group that, oh, go ahead, start. There's very little teacher engagement. often the work that they're doing, although they can do it, is not very challenging. Is not very challenging. So this group shows the least amount of growth over a year unless they're doing something independently on their own. So low teacher time, the least amount of growth. And they often spend their time helping others, which is a good strategy to use because you learn it more when you teach it. But can you imagine at your age if you were still teaching people how to tie their shoe? How bored you would be, even though you are the best shoe tire on the planet? But if that was all, you had to come to work 8 hours a day, you were going to help people who don't know how to tie their shoe tie it. And you're going to be so pleased because they're going to learn it. But what have you learned? That's really important for this group of students. So we cannot ignore what they learn. And again, if we're using Let Me Learn, we will stay focused on this group of students or this group of teachers. These are my teachers who are my high flyers. They're getting it done in the classroom. Most of the time, you don't even know it because they're quiet, they don't tell anybody, they're shy, kids are excelling. And what do we do to them? We say, good job, keep doing what you're doing. And they do. But they never feel like they have an opportunity to stretch and reach. We need to pair them up with other teachers who can push them a little bit further. Give them a challenge so that they just don't sit there, good job, or they become the classroom that everybody has to come in. Everybody has to go see Crystal do classroom management because she's really good at it. That's great. I'm helping. But what are you doing to develop me? And we need to have that mindset. We should be developing all of our teachers and all of our students. So here are some things that we can do. We need to provide opportunities to generate new knowledge. These people, these students, love to test things. They love the what ifs. They love finding new ways of doing things. When I taught math, these kids were often running, I bet I can find another way to do this. I'm like, I bet you can. Go right ahead. Because there isn't just one way to do most things. So we need to make sure when we're planning our lessons that we provide opportunities for these students to do just that. This is my favorite. This is a math problem. Substitute. How many times do we do to particularly our gifted children? If you finish that assignment, then you can work on something extra. But it always starts with, if you finish that assignment. You know they can do that assignment. You know they've already mastered that material. So why do we make them do it? To earn the reward to get what they need. It's not extra credit for them. So we're doing them a disservice when we say, yes, do these 15 math problems, which you can do in your sleep, and then you'll get extra credit. If I were a student, I'd say, how about you just give me some regular credit at my level instead of making me do something that I already know how to do, and I have to do that to get what I need. That is unfair. So substitute. If you know they can do it, give them something challenging. If you know that they can't do it, give them something that they can do. But don't add on. Don't make children feel like they always have to do extra just to get what they need, what's at their level. Allow voice and choice. I love this. You know, when I first started teaching, I said, I'm the teacher, you're the student, I plan everything. That lasted about a year before I realized that students are very smart. And if I just listen to them and allow them to help me plan activities that are engaging, they will actually be engaged in those activities. So I allow for voice. Let me listen to my students. And I also allow for choice, because everybody doesn't like to do the 5-page written report. Yes, I understand it's necessary to do that, but not every assignment. There are creative ways of doing it. So I allow children to choose how they're going to demonstrate proficiency. And that's really important for this group. Engage in something that's meaningful and authentic. Connect to them. Connect to them. And if you don't know how to connect to them, ask them. They'll tell you. They'll tell you what's meaningful. They'll tell you what they're interested in. They'll give you an opportunity to connect. And then finally, provide opportunities for multiple approaches. So it's very important that we give children different avenues to approach the learning. And these are just a few books that I like that have some wonderful strategies in them regarding some of these approaches and how to move this group of children. And I think this PowerPoint will be online somewhere so that you can get this information. If not, I'll make sure that you have it. Okay. Our next group. Let's talk about students we have to push. And these are our students who are very bright. They understand the content, but they're not as effective in those personal skills. So how do we push them along? How do we build these skills? Because often there isn't a curriculum for this. You know, there's no textbook that says Personal Skills 101. So we have to work with children so that they understand how to keep moving forward, even though they're bright. So when we look at them, some of the things we can do is we need to know what are those barriers and fears. What's stopping them from moving? You ever see children who are very bright, you know they can do it, but then they don't try because they're afraid? Why? Why are they afraid? We need to address that. Or students who just won't live up to their potential for whatever reason. We need to address that. Or students who, at the first sign of failure, I'm done. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't start it. I don't know what to do. And you know they can. So we need to address those barriers and remove those fears. Again, allowing for voice and choice will help because once students feel comfortable with the material, they're more likely to engage and sustain it. Focus on their interest. Again, ask them. Talk to children, even young children. Talk to them. Find out. Make your lessons engaging for them. And then again, make it meaningful, authentic. And this is my favorite. For this group of children, teach them how to fail. Teach children how to fail. You know who's teaching children how to fail? Video games. Video games are teaching children how to fail. There isn't a child in the world that picks up a video game, if it's handheld, on a computer, TV, and thinks, I'm going to master level 1 through 12 the first time I try this. No child believes that. As a matter of fact, children expect to fail at video games. That's part of the fun, to come back and say, I beat the challenge at level 1. They will persist. Talk about personal skills. Watch a child play a video game. You'll see endurance. They'll get creative, especially some of these interactive games where they can play with their friends online. You know, I've watched that and I'm going, that is amazing how they collaborate. They have all of these skills and they are not afraid to fail in a video game. Get excited about it. We'll spend hours on it and can't wait till the next day to get back to that game. What if our classrooms were like that? What if our kids came in, I just can't wait to give it another shot today. Oh, we're doing equilibrium. I can't wait. Yesterday I had no clue, but today I have some skills. I would just love that. But we have to teach children how to fail. Often when they fail in education, it's not a learning experience. It's not fun. It doesn't ignite that, ooh, I've got to beat this. But we can do that for children because we can remove all those stigmas that make it seem like it's bad to fail. It's great to fail if you learn and failing pushes you forward. So our classrooms need to encourage failure and teach children how to fail well, and how to learn from it, and get excited about the new learning. Don't worry about the failing. Get excited about what you learn from the failing, just like in video games. And again, here are some resources that I've read that I like, that I use, when I'm working with my staff and my students in terms of moving them forward and having what we call that grit to really just come in there. And this works for teachers too, because I have some teachers who love the safe lessons. And the one thing about observing teachers that I don't like is when you have to tell them the day and the time that you're coming in. Because for some of my teachers, they're like, this is my observation lesson. Every time someone observes me, this is the safe lesson. It works. I don't want to see the safe lesson. I actually like when it doesn't work because then I get to see the real learning. But I, as superintendent, have to make my teachers and my principals feel comfortable with the fact that if this fails, she's not going to look at me and go, why did I hire you? I cannot create that environment. I have to make them feel comfortable with failure. It starts at the top. So I set the tone in my district, in my buildings, with my principals, who set the tone for their teachers, who set the tone for their children, who set the tone for their parents. Because think of all the parents who never learned how to read, so they're afraid. Didn't do the math that we're doing today. That's not how they learned it. They're not going to engage. But we have to make that learning fun, and we have to recognize fun and failure go together. And we can make failure fun for people. So this is really, really important with these kids. Okay, my next group of kids, the ones that need a little push, they are very energetic, very excited. They are the first ones. You ask a question, you're not even finished, and hands are up. And you're looking at them going, I didn't even finish the question. They just, and then you call on them, and what happens? They just stall, but they're so excited to participate. They're so eager. Or they'll give you an answer that has nothing to do with what you're talking about. They are so off base, you're wondering, where have you been this entire lesson? But they're there. They want to be there. They want to help. These are my kids who have great personal skills, but their content knowledge is not quite there. So how do we help them? They need tools. We'll see this a lot with students who are learning a language. They want to. They're like, I want to know it, but I don't know the language well enough to engage. So how can you help me? What tools can you give me? So some of the things that we need to do for these students is really chunk that knowledge together. We need to package it for students. And when we're teaching, we need to teach through the senses. One of the earlier charts talked about how students input information. It is through all of the senses. So when I'm teaching kids about plants, we're outside, we're digging in the dirt. We are actually dirty nails, everything. They're getting dirty with the soil. We are smelling everything. Stinky plants, beautiful flowers. We're going to smell it all because I want them to have that experience. And I want to chunk it together so that they can relate and they can pull those experiences in. I have to scaffold knowledge for them. You have to build on previous information and give them multiple times to engage. It takes about 7 times for something new to really, really stick. 7 times. So we have to build in opportunities where kids can have those multiple touches and be able to connect that information. And again, using multisensory approaches helps, particularly when you're talking language learners who can't understand everything you're saying. So make your room another learning environment for them. Give them the visuals, give them the sounds, give them a place where they can interact with their senses. Help them make a connection, their schema. How can I connect this to you in your culture? Tell me about your culture. Again, listening to students. Tell me about your culture so I can make this meaningful for you. Frequent reinforcement. These children do need a pat on the back. They need to know that they're doing well, and we need to do that quite often. Don't assume that just because you put a mark on the page that that's good enough. Give them that frequent reinforcement. Call home, reinforce the families. Call home and say the good things that the children are doing. The more you do that, the more comfortable they become, and the quicker they get on board. And of course, critical input experiences. That's that first impression, the first time they see this, the first time they interact with this. And I was a science teacher, so you can imagine my room was a demonstration room. On the first day of school, when kids would come to me, and I taught high school chemistry, I'm outside in the hallway with a respirator mask on, going, kids do not know me, and they see me. I look like something out of a scary movie, and I'm their teacher. I have long rubber gloves up to my arms. And as they're walking into my room, and it was traditional when I first started teaching, that we would give each kid an index card, ask them to write their name, their address, their phone number, their book number, all this information. I would stand at a door with a test tube with liquid in it, holding it, and I would be shaking like, and the kids would look at me, and I was like, take it. They'd walk into the room, and I'm like, just be gentle, shh, no noise. And they're captivated. This is the first day of school. I don't even tell them my name. The first day of school. And we do this whole interactive lab it's salt water, but they don't know that. They think it's some real crazy chemical. And we just test it, and all of a sudden there's a precipitate in one person's, and they're like, oh, what's wrong with it? Great lesson. That's critical input. They will never forget that. They will be able to connect to that. And, when I see my students now, they say, remember that time when you dressed up and you had the respirator on and you were standing out there? And I go, yes, I remember, but I'm glad they remember because they remember the learning that went along with that. So when you're planning lessons, that critical input, that first time, becomes so important for some children that we have to make it meaningful. And again, here are some resources that I use that help me develop those things and really work on helping these children. Okay, this is probably the group. We're teachers, raise your hand. Okay, this is the group that makes you tired at night. You go home and you're just like, oh, I worked harder than Johnny did today. I put in more work than he did. This is the group that requires our most energy. They were probably kids we had to push at one point, but just lost their way. They either experienced so much failure that they gave up, or they didn't have the personal skills, or they couldn't get the content knowledge quick enough that they're now in this category. And again, a lot of the things that we already talked about work well for this group of students. They need a lot of touches from you, a lot of interaction, and so do their families. Don't forget about the families, because the children spend the day with us, but then they go home. And we can't assume that they're getting this at home, so we need to build up the families with these same things. They also need frequent reinforcement, but you need to structure frequent success. You need those moments where they just go, oh my gosh, I did it. And take time to celebrate those frequent success moments. And then again, you need to remove those barriers and fears. So listen to children, talk to them, find out what the stumbling block is. A lot of children here are behavioral problems. And you wonder, why are there behavioral problems? Some kids who cannot read will just act out. You know why? Because I don't want you to know that I can't read. So I'd rather have you think that I am a behavioral problem. I hope you'll send me out of class so that I don't have to read out loud. It's a smoke screen. So we need to really address this and give kids different ways to get that content knowledge and to work through that. And again, give them opportunities to learn how to fail forward. And some of the resources that I like for this, working with this group of kids, are up here. Here is where, if you majored in drama or theater, it's going to work for you, because these children require you to exert so much energy. But I have to tell you, they are absolutely worth it. They are absolutely worth it. You will go home tired, sweating, wondering, what have I done? But later, you'll look and you'll say, wow, the impact that I had on this child has been phenomenal. Okay, so now let's put it all together. We've just talked about a whole bunch of things that we as educators can do. So let's look at this in terms of actual students and let me learn. So this is student number 1. This is Lenny. And here are Lenny's Let Me Learn scores. So this is what I know about Lenny. That Lenny is highly precise and avoids technical. Highly precise and avoids technical. I also know that Lenny is one of the ones I'm going to point in the right direction. So he understands the content, he has great personal skills. So let's look at the characteristics of Lenny. Lenny's eager, ready to work. But I know as an educator, the minute I give Lenny an assignment, Lenny has a million questions. Right then, right now, Lenny needs all the details. His precision is so high. I have to ask, I have to ask, I have to ask. So I need to structure myself so that I can answer them, so that Lenny can be successful. I know I have to give that upfront information for Lenny to be successful. I know Lenny likes to challenge things. So I'm actually going to structure activities where Lenny can do that. Have at it. Go for it. He's reflective. But the technical reasoning is something that Lenny avoids. So knowing that, I am not going to give Lenny a solo project, one to work by himself, that requires a lot of technical reasoning. That just wouldn't be a good idea. He could probably do it, but he may struggle through it. So if it is a project or an activity or an experience that requires a lot of technical reasoning, because I know my students, I can pair Lenny up with someone who has that. And together, Lenny with his precision and another student with their technical reasoning, they can work successfully together. But that's starting from what I know about the learner and using that information to construct experiences that will push Lenny forward. Now, in the same class, sitting next to Lenny is Jared. Jared also has high content knowledge, very bright, but very low personal skills. Jared gets frustrated easily, very easily. And if we take a look at Jared's Let Me Learn scores, Jared is highly technical. This would be a good partner for Lenny to work with if we were doing the kinds of activities that require that. But when I'm working with Jared, Jared needs things to be relevant. And Jared does not want to sit through and listen to me lecture for 30 minutes while I give instructions. Jared is like, just give me the essence and let me go. Let's go. So for working with Jared, I'll get him started. And then I'll keep coming in and giving him a little tidbit of information. Jared is the kid, if you taught science and you have your science equipment out on a table, the worst thing you could do is have science equipment out on a table, have kids come in, tell them to sit, and then tell them, don't touch anything. Jared is losing his mind right now. He can't sit there with a bunch of things and not touch them. He wants to touch them. I know he wants to touch. Then we're in a battle now because I told you not to touch it. You know, Lenny is sitting there going, are there directions for this? Because I want to read the directions. But Jared needs to touch. So if you don't want him to touch, don't tempt Jared. But maybe tempt Jared. Put things out there and let him touch. Let him go for it. Let him get into it. I love that. I put stuff out all the time, and then 10 minutes into the lesson, I'm sitting there looking at the kids. I'm looking at who's moving and who's sitting there waiting patiently for directions. And they're like, are you going to tell us what to do? And I said, I've been watching what you've been doing just to see what kids do. They'll start building things. They'll start experimenting. They'll come up with new ways to do things as long as it's safe. You want to make sure it's safe. Let them go for it. Structure your day that way. All your kids who avoid technical are sitting there like, But you also have to be careful when you group students because you have to teach them to work together because Jared here will take over. Jared will do the whole lesson while everybody else sits there, and you don't want that. So you really have to be knowledgeable about how you group students and how you teach them to work together. Okay, sitting behind Jared is Karen. And here are Karen's Let Me Learn scores. And Karen just makes me go, wow, because Karen is high in precision. That's her use first. She's high in confluence. That's her use first. And then she avoids sequence and precision. And Karen is wonderful to have in class, but Karen can drain me. She's very imaginative and creative. You love having Karen on your team. She is the one. However, sometimes she could get so immersed in details, and they're not the right details. Because if we look at Karen, although she has high personal skills, she has low content knowledge. So if you have students who don't really know the content, and they're highly precise. They get stuck on details that are not important, and you're sitting there going, but that's not what I need you to do. I need you to come over here. So I know that about Karen. Karen gets stuck there. She can get frustrated. She can ask a lot of questions that aren't really the questions that you want to ask. So you have to move Karen in a different direction, and you have to partner Karen. And sometimes Karen can get sidetracked, and sometimes Karen can get scattered with her work that she does. And we all love it. When Karen is finished, your jaw just drops. You're like, wow. But it may have taken Karen, 2 hours to do what you thought was 30 minutes. So you might have to be a little bit more flexible with time because her creative processing is bouncing all over the place. And she might not fit into your 30-minute window. So you may have to be flexible and differentiate your time with Karen. But again, if we believe Karen can succeed, she will. And then finally, there's Toby. Toby's in the back of the room with his hood on, not bothering anyone. Here are Toby's patterns. He's highly sequential. And Toby now is withdrawn, probably because he didn't get that sequential need met. Right? He needs to know step by step. And because Toby has low content knowledge, this is not the kid I want to give 10 steps to. I want to give him short steps and then check on him and then give him more and then check on him and then work with him because I have to build both his personal skills and his content knowledge because he's withdrawn. So you really do need to take a look at him. This is the kid who can slip through the cracks if we're not careful. Quiet, not a behavioral problem, won't ask questions, won't ask for help, sits in the back, looks like he might be working, but maybe not. So we really need to pay attention to the children in our room because you have a Toby probably in your room, and you need to do something different for Toby. Okay, wrapping it up here. So why? I probably exhausted you. You're like, I can't do that. That's so much work. But it's such important work, and it's work that we absolutely have to do. And I admit, yes, it's draining, and yes, but it's probably the most important work on the planet. And I don't think anybody who manufactures anything can say what we can say about the impact we have on children, regardless of what they do. So it's important because it works. So if you just take a look at this chart, assuming that an average district leader, which would be myself, an average school leader, and an average teacher net at 0 in terms of student growth. So what happens when just the teacher moves from average to excellent? By listening to their kids, by establishing a 3P focus, by using Let Me Learn. And you can see here that the percentage increase, and this is reading scores from Marzano, goes up by 20 percentile points. Just when a teacher moves from average to excellence by focusing on the learner. And even more interesting, since I'm not in the classroom anymore and my principal, Judy Bronson, isn't in the classroom anymore, some people say, well, what's the importance of a building principal? What does the superintendent do? Well, if I'm setting the tone right for the district and Judy's leading her teachers, even if all the teachers don't move, if the district leader and the school leader move from average to excellence, because we're establishing that climate, we're making teachers feel comfortable with failing forward. We're giving yes to the risk. If we do that, you can see here that student percentile for reading increases as well. So it's really important, and it does work. It does work. But this is the real reason why we need to do it. These are some of my kids. Don't they deserve it? Don't children sitting in front of us deserve our absolute best every day? There isn't a day that I can walk in and say, today is the day you deserve my mediocre lesson. They don't deserve my mediocre lesson. They deserve my best lesson all the time. They absolutely need me to have courage to listen to them. They do. And then finally, I have a lot of kids. I'm a parent. I send my kids to school. Parents trust us. They hope that we are doing the very things that I'm talking about. I need to know that my teachers know which one of my kids they need to push, pull, and point, because my children are very different and they have very different needs. And they spend 7 hours a day, 180 days away from me with other people who are taking care of them. And shouldn't those people know my children? And shouldn't they orchestrate a push, a pull, the same way someone did it for me so that my children could be successful? So that is my presentation. Thank you for... Now, I have to tell you, I am high in precision, so I was trying to stay on time the whole entire time we're up here, using my patterns.